West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
In this particular service, Gretta will be referencing to a video that will be in the description below.
I was trying to find it in larger print, but I haven't been able to. The focus moment was inspired by the idea or the reality that when an infant is born, the most important thing for that infant's development in the first several months of life, but really significantly in the first weeks of life, are that there be a set of eyes that looks into theirs and holds that gaze, establishing trust and confidence, soothing and settling anxiety. And if those eyes aren't there, if they're busy elsewhere or they're confused or sad or don't connect, then lifelong issues can develop. And so it's that pair of dark circles, dark spots, that I speak of today. Before it can be started, it begins. The quest for the paired black spots become focused one on another. Acknowledgement, acceptance, recognition, permission to devour the world around. Through grass-stained knees, popped blow-up pools, novels, notebooks, 45s to downloads, fads become history. To learn become boring. Friends become lovers. Passions become disappointment, become the brittle, well, you know. And wax-filled smoke spiraling year after year till no one bothers anymore, and life goes on. Paired black spots now become inconvenient, difficult. Practiced avoidance become the norm. Life becomes of its own accord, and we lose ourselves in the power of its becoming, our own given over, given over, given over. Before it ends, let it begin. The quest for the paired black spots become focused, one on another, acknowledgement, acceptance, recognition, permission to devour the world around, becoming our true selves.
Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, Somebody's calling my name. Oh my soul, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like freedom, freedom is calling my name. Sounds like freedom, freedom is calling my name. Sounds like freedom, freedom is calling my name. Oh my soul, what shall I do? What shall I do? Sounds like justice, justice is calling my name. Sounds like justice, justice is calling my name. Sounds like justice, justice is calling my name. Oh my soul, what shall I do? What shall I do? Hush, hush. Somebody's calling my name. Sounds like freedom, freedom is calling my name. Sounds like justice, justice is calling my name. Oh my soul, what shall I do? What shall I do? What shall I do?
Dawn.
Dawn, you're muted. We can't hear you. Thank you, sir.
You're still muted. You're still muted, Dawn. Are you able to unmute him? No? Okay. All right, you're good now, Dawn. Thank you.
We'll try again. Almost everything ever written could be characterized as being about life, railing against it, celebrating its beauty, sharing a day in an informal letter to a friend, a play about conquerors or family woes, the various pursuits of science, religion, languages, perhaps absolutely everything. These words were added to the list and offered for reflection as we explore today the Academy Award 2023 nominated film, Living. And the first reading to that end is from a work by C. Joyce Bell, a modern, a leading female thinker and a mentor to many modern day leaders. She writes, I've come to accept the feeling of not knowing where I am going. And I have trained myself to love it. Because it is only when we are suspended in midair with no landing in sight that we force our wings to unravel and at last begin our flight. And as we fly, we may still not know where we are going, but the miracle is in the unfolding of our wings. You may not know where you're going, but you know so long as you spread your wings, the winds will carry you. The second reading from work by James Arthur Baldwin, a well-known American novelist who has inspired many through the 20th century. He writes, life is tragic. Simply because the earth turns and the sun inexorably rises and sets. And one day, for each of us, the sun will go down for the last time. Perhaps the whole root of our trouble, the human trouble, is that we will sacrifice all the beauty of our lives. We'll imprison ourselves in totems, taboos, crosses, blood sacrifices, steeples, mosques, races, armies, flags, nations, in order to deny the fact of death, the only fact we have. It seems to me that one ought to rejoice in the fact of death, ought to decide indeed to earn one's death by confronting with passion the conundrum of life. One is responsible for life. It is the small beacon in that terrifying darkness from which we come and to which we shall return. Offered as wisdom for the journey.
May we walk in its light.
Oh, okay. We're going to watch the trailer for the movie now. Thank you. And for sticking that link in for later. Okay. Now you go on. I've put the podium aside because papers frighten me. Before I went on leave, those of you who have read my blog will know that I was having some significant cognitive issues, which turned out to be related to a medication I was on. But for several months before that, I couldn't remember what I was going to be speaking about on a Sunday morning. And so I took to trying to follow the page. If I got lost, I couldn't even remember the topic. So I started following the page, but then I would get lost in the page. And if you go back and watch some of those old videos, you'll see me putting the page aside and saying, I don't know where I am, right? And I don't want that to happen. I've got highlighters. Like, that's a problem, right? If I start highlighting things, I'm not going to know where I am. So I'm just going to tell you what I think is important to know. And if you hang around later, I'll tell you the things I forgot to tell you. Okay.
Love it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So this is a tradition that has gone back many, many years. We've done this Academy Award series. It came about, I believe, as part of West Hill's emergence as a community that wanted to step away from a biblical text. And we had moved away from lectionary readings each week, which gave us a biblical text that we could look at. And I, every week, still looked at those texts and would pull a theme out of them and share that theme with you. But coming up with themes was not always easy. And so having the Academy Award series took, 6 off my plate, because I had 6 services that could focus on movies. So it felt right at this time of year to come back with a movie. And when I went to living with some friends, well, that was pretty much the perfect movie to come back to. The movie is set in Britain. It's based on a movie that was made in 1952 in Japan. These are the things that are on the paper, the name of the actual movie, Akiru, and the producer, Akuru. Those are the things I'm not going to remember. And I'm not going to find the pages to tell you. You can look that stuff up, right? But it was based on a movie made in 1952 in post-war Japan. And it's made in 1953 set in 1953 in post-war Britain. The rubble has been cleaned up, but the whole society has tightened around how it wants to be and how it wants to live. And there's a sense of belonging when you know what things are supposed to be like, right? Like when everyone does exactly the same thing, you feel that you're belonging. I was looking at my hands the other day, and I was thinking about all those gloves that women used to wear all the time. Do you know what you could get away with those gloves on? Like, the stuff that your hands look like, I mean, honestly, my hands look terrible all the time. But if I could just put some gloves on and go to church, then I would look just perfect, right? And so we had those kinds of norms that soothed over a lot of the things that had gone on during the war and created such havoc and displacement and loss and rebuilding that put in place things that were foreign and not appreciated because they were different. So we come to Rodney Williams' life. A young man is getting on a train to go into London to work at the council offices, and he's so excited about it. It's his first day. You can tell he's a little keen. He gets invited to sit with a number of the people who work there who recognized him from the job interview, and so he sits with them. And then the train pulls up, and Rodney Williams is there. And he is the perfect example of everything they want to be. He is so highly respected. He is just an icon of what the council offices need to be. And that's, you see the picture of him tipping his hat in the trailer. So they get there, and the new guy, whose name I can't remember, sits at his desk, and he sees what happens, right? He watches what happens. They all have these mammoth stacks of files that they sort of work through periodically, or they file things in the slot because it won't hurt to keep it here for a little while. And you see that it runs tickety-boo, and the respect that Mr. Williams gets from his colleagues is based on his being able to belong in that situation. And amongst a group of people who believe that doing things appropriately, doing them properly in the right time, as is expected, is the best way to belong and to get along. So their beliefs are all shared. The sense of belonging is around the way things are to be lived out in that office. There's this woman who's there for a short time, and she's young, and you kind of get the idea that she's not really going to fit in quite the same way. She smiles and she talks and she dresses sort of brightly, and sure enough, you find out that she's actually leaving and going somewhere else. And that's one of the themes. It's like there are some people who don't want to just do exactly this stuff. How many people? Hands? Zoom? Yes. Yeah, people who don't want to do just this stuff. Well, we've had a generation or two to break out of that mold, that post-war mold that so much of the world was embedded in. So Williams, who has had this perfect job for all his life and has the admiration of his colleagues, gets pulled in yet again to another conversation. A group of women, mothers, come from an area in the city, and they want to have a playground put there. There's a site there that would be perfect for it. They've gone through all the applications, and they've gone to every office in the building in order to get approval. The Parks and Recreation, Forestry, the local council, and they keep sending them to other places. And finally, Mr. Williams gets the file, and I think he's had it probably several times before, and he just puts it in his little file thing and says, won't hurt anything to have it there for a while. And that is really the only kind of vibrant thing that happens in the office, is these women traipsing in and bringing their little file and saying where they've been in the building already that day and several times before in order to make something different. But Mr. Williams experiences a very significant difference one day when he learns that he has stomach cancer and he only has 6 to 12 months to live. I say 6 to 12 because when I was reviewing it, one of the reviewers said 6 and one of them said a year. I couldn't remember what it said in the movie, so it was a short time to live. And when he got the news, he didn't go back to work from his appointment. He just didn't go back to work. He went home, and he lived with his son and daughter-in-law, who weren't particularly lovely. They were just kind of waiting for him to get out so they could have the house. And, you know, he heard all these conversations because he was stunned, and he'd gone sitting in the dark when he got home. He just sat there until it got dark, and they came in thinking he wasn't there and said all these things, which he heard, right? And as his father, how do you feel about that? When you hear what your children really, really want, you want them to have that. And so he doesn't tell them that he's sick because he doesn't want to put that burden on those young people's lives. He doesn't share that, but he doesn't want to tell them, and he doesn't tell them at all. And the next day, he doesn't get up and go to work. He goes to the bank, takes out half his life savings, buys a ton of sleeping pills, and heads for the coast, where he's going to commit suicide and end his life. He ends up in a little restaurant, meets up with a guy who can't sleep. He ends up giving the guy all the sleeping pills. He doesn't drown. And they go out. The guy says, "I'll show you living." And they go out and they spend a night on the town in all kinds of debauchery and ways that they could, you know, have a good time. But at the end, looking at each other, they recognize, you know, that didn't feel like life either. And so he tries to figure out what to do. And he goes back to London. And while he's dining in a restaurant, he sees the woman who had left the job. She's working as a waitstaff person in the restaurant, though she had said something about a manager position. And they have lunch together, and they start seeing each other quite a bit. And you have to speculate about why he wants to spend so much time with her, but it's probably life. It's that she's doing things that are interesting and fun, and they spend a lot of time together, and they talk about significant things, and he tells her that he's dying. And she's really the only person that he tells. And throughout that period with her, as he comes to know her, he comes to embrace some of those things that are important for our lives. Saul Levine, who is a professor in psychiatry, emeritus professor in psychiatry, has written about what he calls an emotional footprint. And that's what it is that helps us understand how it is that we are walking through the world and how other people see us. And Williams has had two of them down. I've already mentioned them. Belonging. He knew he belonged because everything that he did was exactly within the parameters of what he was supposed to do, right? And so he belonged because of that. And that set of beliefs, which told him that was what he was supposed to do and that framed that belonging, those were two things. Our beliefs, what it is that we set out as the values for our lives and how we want to be in the world. If we have a set of those and we choose to live them out, then people can see that that's what we're doing, that we have this congruity with what it is we want to do. We're not all over the place. It used to be that religious beliefs were the way people would identify those, but now we identify them in a number of different ways. And belonging. What are the tribes we belong to? Who are the groups that we spend our time with? Where do we put our energy and our voice? Where do we dare put it? Where do we risk love? Do we have a sense that there's a place where we can do those things? There's our people with whom we can do those things. We belong within that context. And both of those things with that diagnosis had unraveled for Williams. He no longer had a sense that what he was doing was the right thing to do. He no longer had a sense that he belonged, because take that away and what was he? And during the time with Miss Harris, when he's spending time with her and enjoying and laughing and learning, he decides that he really wants to do something of significance in his life. And he remembers those women, I'm pretty sure they had gloves on, walking through the building. So he decides that if he's going to do something with the last bit of his life, he's going to give them a park, right? And he doesn't care whether hell or high water gets in his way. That's what he's going to do. And so because everyone else still recognizes him as belonging. And because he knows exactly the beliefs within which they're all functioning, he goes in and he pulls that file out of his little file shelf and he starts making the rounds in the building. He goes to the Parks Department, he goes to the Forestry Department, he goes to the Water and Sewer Department, he goes to the whatever, and he gets every little signature that he needs from every person who thinks that they're the big person that can get in the way of this, because he just stares them down. Or he goes over and over. And he ends up with permission to turn this lot infested with rats into this little park. Now it's maybe the size of this room. It has a swing set and one of those things that you run around in circles. I've never figured them out, but you run around in circles and I think you get on them and feel, I don't know. But it has one of them and a set of swings, and that's pretty much it, and a concrete on the ground. But he's done something significant. And in that process, he's filled out those two other things that Saul Levine talks about. In the process, he's connected with his sense and his courage that allows him to give, to be benevolent. When we live afraid, and when we live afraid of giving ourselves away, or our things away, or our voice away, or whatever, then we hold it all in so tightly. I think the first benevolent thing that he did is the one that shatters his son's heart at the end, when he learns that he asks Miss Harris if she knew that he was dying because his father had never told him he was dying. But that was his act of benevolence, his first act of giving himself away. You don't need this. I know you don't want to know this. You don't want this to complicate your life or your relationship. So I'm not going to tell you. And that's going to be my gift for you, hard though it was for him at the end. And as most of us would figure it out, we don't want to deal with the mess of somebody's illness, right? We'll just find out later. But his act of benevolence was that first one. And the second was that every step he climbed to go from one office to another, to knock on a door and ask for a signature and get something turned around so that those kids could have, and some of them weren't very appreciative. They were just kids playing and they weren't even playing nice sometimes. But it didn't matter. He did it and he gave it to them so that they could do that. So that benevolence grew in his heart. And as that happened, he came into this sense of congruity with his own being, right? His being. Like we talk about beingness and who we are, but it has to radiate out from who we are. We have to feel that sense of who we are. We have to know, yeah, that would be me, right? If you saw that, that would be me. I would be that person. And he never, I think, prior to that, differentiated himself from his job and his responsibilities. That's who he was. But this making a difference, this connecting with people, this was him being him. I think the course of the movie is the course of coming to life for Rodney Williams. But it's the course, if you take all of Levine's, the four things that he talks about being, or belonging, and beliefs, and benevolence, and being, they're about what life is. Living is about becoming. It's about becoming. When I went on leave here, when I went on leave and I was unwell, I don't think any of you would have said that my life hadn't had meaning. I mean, I chalked up my intellectual, what's it called? My, whatever I'm giving off to the next generation. I'd done all those things. I'd had a life that matters, and I identify it as having mattered, even though some of it maybe shouldn't have mattered quite as much. But so when during this process of withdrawing from this medication, I came to the point where life was the question. Life or not life? I didn't have the same kind of experience as did Williams, right? It wasn't that, okay, now how can I do something that matters? I'd done the stuff that matters. It was just whether to go on, right? That was the question, was whether to go on. And that didn't matter to me. It didn't matter at that point in time. And I'm here because my physician stepped in and gave me medication that I didn't really want to take, but it saved my life, and I'm here to talk about that. Because I'm still becoming. It's not just my legacy. It's not just what I've done. It's not just whether I mattered. It's not whether I made a difference somewhere. It's that I'm still becoming. It's an active thing. And I want to keep becoming until the end, whenever that happens. All of that was kind of put into perspective with this movie as I watched him become, and I did the reading for the perspective, and I recognized, you know, the whole movie, given what I had been through in the last over 2 years, that whole piece was a little too close to home for me, but it helped me move beyond just what matters to the reality that we're here. We are. We have much we can share. We have more we can become. And we have the opportunity to do it with other people in ways we've done it before, and in radically new, daring ways we might not yet have dreamt. So Living, the movie Living, was about becoming. And becoming is what I think holds our lives together. Thank you.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.